volunteer recruitment is so incredibly important. It's finding that sweet spot between the amount of applicants or clients that you're anticipating and also the volunteers. You go one way too much, one way or the other, you might have some problems during the clinic. So trying to find appropriate volunteers is really important. I think a big thing to think about is what roles and volunteers do you need? You might need attorneys, but do you need expert immigration attorneys? And that's somewhere where your local AILA chapter can really come in and be supportive on that. Having attorneys that maybe don't practice immigration law, but have some skills that they can add is something to consider. Going to local bar associations or other affinity bar associations or law firms. Another important volunteer aspect to consider is non-attorneys. There's great roles for non-attorneys, whether it's interpretation. If you're doing an in-person clinic, you do need those people that maybe shuttle applicants from one station to the next. And then also potentially, depending on how your clinic's structured, you might want to have volunteers plug in as form preparers or completing some of the initial paperwork that's going to be later reviewed by an attorney or somebody doing quality control. So you want to get creative. Consider law schools. They're a great source for your non-attorney volunteers. Different undergraduate programs regarding for linguistics, for perhaps interpreters or translation support. There's a lot of interesting ways. And then also reaching out to your local partners. Last session, we talked about the importance of local partners and partnering with people. These individuals oftentimes do have their own bank and sources of volunteers that may be interested in plugging in. So making sure that you have really clearly delineated volunteer opportunities and potential sources on where to source these individuals.
I love that. Those are all really great ideas. And what about a little bit about training? You talked about different types of volunteers. Do you have any tips on how you can maybe facilitate trainings, all one group training, separate trainings? What are your thoughts on some of that?
Oh, that's a good question. And I think it depends on what sort of clinic you're launching, what's the subject matter, what service are you going to be delivering, and what sort of role people are going to be occupying. And also, I want to stress it's important to do maybe multiple trainings. Having a virtual, like online training in advance or recording that people can access in advance is important. But you definitely want to redo at least a light version of that training the day of the event, because people get busy and they may not be able to join in advance or watch the video. Depending, I think it's really important to have a training on the flow of the event. The substance, you're going to want to train on the substance, particularly for your experts or people doing quality control. But just so everybody has an understanding how the event is working, how people work their way through different stations or different parts of the process, and what volunteers are doing at those individual stages, and making sure that there's a clear understanding on that. I do think it's helpful to do some different trainings, that there should be a training that applies to everybody, like the flow, or maybe just general information about the service being provided. If it's temporary protected status clinics, making sure everybody really understands what TPS is and the process and the forms involved. But then doing a more focused training for individuals that are doing form preparation, making sure they really understand the process of completing the forms, and what to flag as far as if there's any issues, when they might want to raise a hand and make sure that they get an expert in the room or to the station to provide review. So I think the big thing is figuring out what service you're providing, what type of clinic. But I do think it's a good idea to have some very specific trainings for your experts, for your quality control folks, but then also general trainings that apply to everybody.